Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the leaders who are here at the table and virtually at the table for all the work that you do and have been doing for such a long time. I thank you for the outreach that you provided to me and the President to bring everyone together, to have this conversation and to join leaders in civil rights with leaders in reproductive rights and justice, to come together in the spirit of partnership, collaboration, community building, coalition building, and to build on a movement. Because certainly we know that with the Supreme Court having made the decision in Dobbs to take a constitutional right that had been recognized from the people of America, from the women of America, has created a healthcare crisis in America and has highlighted the fact that, as we all know, we must be vigilant and we must stand shoulder to shoulder to ensure that every voice is represented in a way that allows them equal access to all that they need to thrive. And this moment, post-Dobbs, highlights the fact that we still have a lot of work to do. So we have come together understanding our common principles and purpose based on the history of the work and the continuing work that each of you does every day. And so I want to thank you for that. And I will say that when we think of the intersection between the civil rights movement and the reproductive health and justice movement, there is an extraordinary intersection of interest, priorities, and spirit around what it means to stand for all people and ensure that all people have equal access to what they need. I also want to mention that it is certainly, we think, not by accident, but probably by design, that we are seeing from some of the same sources attacks on women's health rights, voting rights, LGBTQ rights. And so we stand here in full acknowledgement of what is taking place in our country and the need then to bring people together who seemingly sometimes have nothing in common, but who in fact have everything in common. So with that, I thank you again. This is a movement that I do believe is about freedom. It is about justice. And it is about some of the core values that our country was founded on that we must stand for. So with that, I thank you. I'm going to turn now to Emmy Ruiz, who is the head of political strategy and outreach for the White House and for our administration, to moderate our discussion. Emmy.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Welcome all. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I want to start by thanking you for your fierce advocacy and partnership and many of the things that we've done in this administration. We know that this conversation is incredibly important. We look forward to hearing from you and working with you. I'll say that we know that your time is valuable, so we'll just get started. Alexis?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. It's an honor to be here with you all. My name is Alexis McGill-Johnson. I'm the President and CEO of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and I'm so grateful to you and the Biden administration for hosting us all today, and really grateful to be here in this room with our partners in the civil rights community. When you stand with us, as you have and always have, you understand that the fight for reproductive freedom is a fight for racial justice, and it's really a fight for our very democracy. So you said it's been almost 3 months, right, since the Supreme Court took away our constitutional right to abortion. And in that time, 16 states have already moved to ban abortion. Another one will go into effect this week. Tens of millions of women, trans men, and non-binary people cannot access the care they need in their communities. And those that are most affected are those who are already facing barriers to care. Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities, rural communities, immigrant communities, those with low incomes, living, as you said, in states with the highest maternal mortality rates and the states with the most restrictive voting laws. Make no mistake, these bans are working exactly as they were intended to create a public health crisis. There is chaos. Every week, the abortion landscape changes. Appointments have to be rescheduled. Patients have to secure new options, which often means traveling further, delaying time-sensitive care, or foregoing care and being forced into pregnancy. Planned Parenthood, we just did an analysis of the last year of SB 8 in Texas, and the average distance our patients have traveled is 400 miles by car. And that's just out of Texas, with a Texas zip code. We've seen an increase of 550% of patients out of state in just Texas. There's also confusion. Providers, hospitals, administrators, pharmacists have had to become lawyers in order to interpret what these bans mean for their patients, whether that's when and how to dispense medicine, or whether to send patients home when their pregnancies are no longer viable to wait for sepsis to set in as they justify providing life-saving treatment. Our providers, independent providers, our reproductive partners are worried about whether they will become non-compliant retroactively, about what to put on their website, and about how the laws will be enforced. Bounty hunters, $100,000 fines, felony convictions, loss of licensure, these are all the things that are on the table that they are navigating. The Dobbs decision has demonstrated that abortion is everybody's business. Even corporate citizens, universities, and schools are grappling with what to say to their workforce, to their students, to their parents, and how to show up differently in community. There isn't a single person or entity that can stay neutral in this fight, because staying neutral normalizes, in fact, it codifies inequality. What needs to be normalized is the views of the 80% of Americans who believe and support legal abortion. For the roughly 1 in 4 women, trans men, and non-binary folks who will have an abortion in their lifetime. Abortion is normal, it is health care, and yet these bans exist because of stigma, and they're kept there by surveillance. Powerful, invisible weapons used to isolate and intimidate patients, keep people fearful, and justified laws that take away our freedom. I'm grateful for all the steps that the Biden-Harris administration has taken to protect patients and providers in this public health crisis. Patients need support, and this administration has issued an executive order urging Medicaid to support travel, opening up supplemental Title X funds, and making some abortion care available through the VA. It's big. Patients need accurate information. This administration responded by launching reproductiverights.gov. Patients need privacy, and this administration responded by issuing HIPAA guidance. And most importantly, patients need to know that they are not alone, that there are people in positions of power who are fighting for them. And so, Vice President Harris, thank you for speaking with so many people about the abortion access crisis this summer. Over 150 legislators from 17 states and leaders in higher education, healthcare providers, con law experts, attorneys general, disability advocates, and faith leaders. That is what a whole-of-government response looks like. So believe me when I say the whole-of-democracy response is underway. Americans, particularly women, young people, and people of color, are registering to vote in droves. They see the intersections, they see the restrictions on their freedom, and they are determined to make that change. Planned Parenthood is committed to being in this fight with you, the administration, and all of the incredible dedicated leaders and friends at this table. Thank you.
Melanie Campbell, President and CEO, Black Women's Roundtable.
Thank you, Madam Vice President Harris, and of course the Biden-Harris administration for your leadership and commitment to protecting the rights and freedoms of all Americans. I want to take this moment to express my gratitude to the tireless work being done every day by my civil rights and reproductive justice colleagues around this table, and to those who are on the ground in the states, on the front lines, risking their safety and pouring so much into this work for those most vulnerable among us. I want to be very, very clear. We are living in unprecedented times. Our people are experiencing a full partisan assault on our rights, our freedoms, and our democracy, including the historic attack on women's rights to control our own bodies and a tsunami of attacks across the country on our voting rights. As Black women, we stand at the intersection with the full understanding that the struggle for our right to vote is inextricably tied to our rights as women. History has shown us that when our laws have failed to protect us, we have relied on the courts to deliver justice. Unfortunately, we are in a perilous chapter in our nation where too many of our courts have been turned into instruments for partisan gain, all with the aim of preserving power for a select few. Today, we find ourselves in this moment where the highest court in the land is stripping away our constitutional rights and freedoms. Therefore, we must seek protection from our lawmakers, from leaders like you and President Biden and the whole administration, the Congress, in order to codify our rights to achieve justice, equity, and opportunity. As attacks on our reproductive rights continue in states across the country, the health and safety of millions of women, disproportionately Black and other women of color, are in jeopardy and are the most vulnerable, as we all know around this table, to be criminalized, over-criminalized for seeking reproductive health services, including safe access to abortion. Women and girls are now living in this country where they have less rights and protections than their parents and grandparents. In closing, I personally know what it means to have the hard decision to have an abortion. It was the hardest decision of my life. And I believe that it is my responsibility to fight to ensure that women continue to have the constitutional right to bodily autonomy now and in the future, and that we are committed to fusing our movements together to also protect our voting rights and save our democracy from peril. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for answering our call and creating this space to hear our concerns and recommendations in order for us to forge a path forward together. Thank you so much.
Shalondon Hollingshed, Urban League Young Professionals.
Good evening, everyone. So I want to first start by thanking Vice President Harris for her efforts to ensure the voices of my generation are heard and that we have a seat at the table. Thank you. I also want to thank President Morial, the National Urban League family, and all the civil rights organizations who have partnered here for this very important discussion. My name is Shalondon Hollingshed, and as president of the National Urban League Young Professionals, I want you to know that young professionals across the country are fighting for reproductive rights. I'm here to ask for the administration's continued support. The reality is the Dobbs decision endangers women's lives and disproportionately impacts Black women. The maternal mortality rate for Black women is almost 3 times higher than it is for white women. One study shows that with a total abortion ban, the increase of Black women dying from pregnancy-related deaths increases by 33%. It is imperative that we protect women's rights regardless of personal beliefs or political affiliations because the lives of so many women across this country depend on it. We know this decision is part of a larger anti-civil rights, anti-women's rights movement that seeks to harm our democracy as a whole. It is no surprise that states with abortion bans and strict limits in place are the same states suppressing the right to vote. While these efforts to remove fundamental rights and restrict freedoms are discouraging and disheartening, I want you to know that members of the Urban League movement have made up in our minds that we will not give up. We know our response needs to include every facet of the civil rights and democracy communities, particularly those who represent constituencies that traditionally are and continue to be marginalized in our society. We ask that the administration take every possible step to limit the harm of the Dobbs decision will have on Black women and other marginalized groups. Sexual and reproductive health providers who care for this population need to be supported. Misinformation needs to be shut down to ensure the people who need it know how to access critical care. And every effort needs to be made to prevent health care from being weaponized against our communities. We also want to ensure that everyone is aware of how critical our upcoming elections are and the influence that elected officials have on our civil rights, our liberties, and the confirmation of judges who respect civil rights. The administration should use all available resources to protect the election, including both voters and election workers. We are committed to serving as boots on the ground, holding our elected officials accountable, and educating and engaging our community on important civil rights and reproductive rights. I believe that with the continued support of the administration, we can once again see progress towards freedom. Until then, in the words of Ella Baker, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Thank you.
Kimberly Inez McGuire, Executive Director, Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity.
Thank you. I want to start by offering my deepest thanks to the distinguished leaders here today from civil rights, reproductive health and justice, and of course, Madam Vice President, for your incredible leadership. You have been an inspiration to so many, including my own family. This is a momentous discussion. As an organization that is dedicated to young people's reproductive justice, URGE sees every day the way that young people, particularly young people who are Black, Indigenous, Latine, API are disproportionately harmed by this crisis of abortion access. I'm also a queer Latina single mom, and I've dedicated my life to protecting the human right to decide when, if, and how we build our families. As my comrades have acknowledged, we who fight for justice have formidable foes. And make no mistake, we are in a whole-scale attack on self-determination, whether it be our ability to self-determine our pregnancies, the ability of young trans people to live with dignity, go to school, and get health care, or the ability of communities to self-determine in our democracy who will lead and make our laws. It is an attack on all fronts and an attack that we in this room are prepared to take head on. Young Black women and young Black trans people are most harmed by the racist abortion bans that have now been passed in 17 states and counting, facing the impossibility of traveling hundreds of miles for care or potential criminalization for ending their own pregnancies with safe and effective abortion pills like mifepristone and misoprostol. We also know that young people are not sitting by as these injustices proceed. Young people, a majority of whom today are Black, Indigenous, API, or Latina, are on the front lines of the fight for abortion justice, organizing and engaging with urge in engaging voters in the South, Midwest, and California. Young people are working in independent abortion clinics. Young people and young Black women organized and won in Kansas to protect abortion on the ballot and secure it as a constitutional right. Young people are also supporting their own communities, sharing information and supporting loved ones in self-managing their own abortions, which is often their first and sometimes their only choice. We are grateful for the collaboration of this administration and in particular your leadership, and we look forward to working together to continue to address this mounting crisis. Losing Roe has created a national health crisis, but let's be clear, Roe was never enough. Roe was not made to secure the right to abortion for Black women, for young people, for low-income people, and so we look forward not only to securing what we lost, but to regaining what we never had, abortion justice. Thank you.
Nancy Northrup, President and CEO, Center for Reproductive Rights.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. It's so good to be here with you. And the Center for Reproductive Rights argued the Dobbs case in the Supreme Court, so I thought I would share a few reflections from the legal front, and the legal fights, which are still ongoing. You know, as you said, the Supreme Court's decision was an unprecedented stripping of a personal liberty right. Never happened before in the United States. And I think it is wrongly decided. I think it's important for all of us to keep pointing out, most of the American public's not going to read a long decision, but the things that are fundamentally wrong with it. Number one, it's a dangerous approach to constitutional interpretation. As you know, the court said, basically, if you didn't have these rights 150 years ago, then you can't have them in the Constitution today. Secondly, there was no consideration in the majority opinion of the harms which you're hearing about today and that you've heard about in all of your sessions with people from across the country. The health, lives, and future of women and pregnant people were absent from the opinion. Legislative bodies were mentioned in the majority opinion a number of times. Women's bodies weren't mentioned at all. Third, the decision raises legal threats to other rights, to contraception, to same-sex relationships. And there are huge legal threats looming right now that we're wrestling with. The administration has been working on trying to address. Everything from interstate travel, emergency obstetrics care, which thank the administration, thank you for the work on EMTALA and the fights about that. And obviously criminal prosecution from these draconian laws. Texas's law, 99 years in prison for violating it by providers. It's draconian. And finally, I would just say that the decision is out of step with global trends. We are standing virtually alone in regressing on abortion rights throughout the world. In the last 30 years, 60 countries have liberalized their abortion laws, and it is understood in those countries, whether it's by legislation or it's by court decisions, that access to abortion care, decisions about abortion, are a fundamental issue of gender equality. So, our organizations, of course, haven't given up. We are holding the line as best we can. Litigation is going on. We've always been in the state courts, but it's moved more to the state courts. There are some bright spots out there. There's 5 preliminary injunctions in place across the country. But the reality is, as you've already heard, states are falling and it's going to get worse. Another bright spot, of course, is when the voters get to decide themselves whether they want to keep their rights, as we saw in Kansas, they say, heck yeah. And that was really important. And so we're going to hopefully see that as well in Michigan coming up in the fall. But it demonstrates how out of step these legislators are actually with what the people want in terms of retaining their rights. And, ultimately we know that whatever happens with state constitutions, there are some states that there's going to be no path forward in that direction. They don't have initiatives for the voters to take control of themselves and amend their constitution, and their only protections are going to be at the federal level. So thank you to the Biden-Harris administration for your strong support of the Women's Health Protection Act, and it has been particularly powerful for the president to make clear that the filibuster can't stand in the way. So thank you.
Mark Morial, President and CEO, National Urban League.
Thank you very much. Madam Vice President, it is always great to be with you, and I want to thank you for responding to our collective request is this on? Testing, all right. Our collective request for this meeting, and give you a sense of why and how we've come together. So I want to thank the Legacy 8 historic civil rights leaders who are all present today. And I want to thank the leaders of the reproductive and women's rights organizations who are represented, because we made a decision over the July 4th weekend, just after Dobbs, that we were going to come together to reaffirm and reestablish this very powerful coalition. Now, 170 years ago in Ohio, Sojourner Truth gave a very, very famous speech, Ain't I a Woman? And in that speech, she affirmed the connectivity between the abolitionist movement and the women's rights movement. A year later at Seneca Falls, 68 women and 32 men, including Frederick Douglass, signed the Declaration of Sentiments, which outlined a theory and an approach to equal rights, justice, and liberty, which included gender equality. The movements that we are inheritors of began with energy together way back before the Civil War. In the early 1900s and the late 1800s, the suffragist movement and the then burgeoning civil rights movement, which was a response to Plessy, a response to the collapse of Reconstruction, had powerful, powerful connectivity. The founding of the National Urban League was by, on one hand, George Edmund Haynes, a civil rights leader of the era, and Ruth Standish Baldwin, a suffragist leader of that era, and our initial organizational papers including a standing committee on the rights of women. This movement this unity deviated after the passage of the constitutional amendment which gave women the right to vote. Because black women were left out, and all of a sudden there were no constitutional rights for black women to vote. Nonetheless, the reason why we are here is to reaffirm that historic coalition, that the threats, particularly that come from the Supreme Court, that threaten our freedoms and threaten our rights, threaten the rights of women, threaten the rights of people of color, and threaten the very, very work that many of our organizations and the people we love and respect have carried out over the last 50 years to make this a more perfect union. So we are here today because we are determined not to be silent, not to be passive, while the hands of time are pushed backwards. And this is why we're here today. This, for us, is the beginning of a concerted effort to work together. But it is also an effort to educate this generation and our generation of leaders that these movements the movement for the rights of black people and other locked out, left out communities, and the rights of women were tracked, energized, and collaborative at the earliest stages of their inception, and that today, in the 21st century, we have to reestablish that. So we thank you, and I think we are here because we want to march in unison. We want to march together on this issue and many others that will confront our community. So we thank you. We thank your team. We thank the administration because we are in a fight that is a fight of a generation, and it is a fight, but we know how to wage it intelligently. We know how to wage it with strategy. We know how to wage it with passion. We know how to wage it within the confines of the democratic systems and institutions that we all believe in. So thank you for having us, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. This concludes the open press portion. Press, if you please will depart.